All right, guys. What we're going to take a look at today are what I call evidence cards. Flashcards, but in a different name, because the whole focus of the evidence cards is literally to produce evidence, particularly for the essay prompts that the College Board has laid out based upon a series of learning objectives for both AP World History and also AP US History as well. And so these cards are produced not just simply to here's a term, let's memorize it and remember where it fits in, but the goal is to give you something whereby you can take a term such that is utilized to corroborate an argument, to authenticate a claim, to reinforce other pieces of evidence, or to provide documentation to substantiate an argument, thus the acronym CARDS. Okay. Let me provide an example of this here, okay? Because in the end, you have a series of learning objectives that are laid out, again, by the College Board, right? And this is what's utilized not just for teachers to teach, but then also for the essay questions that are produced here. So if you're able to take these learning objectives, okay, to explain the beliefs and practices of a predominant religion in Europe, or to examine the government types used by Chinese dynasties and how they developed over time, questions will be generated from these learning objectives. And so it's important for us to be able to have the vocabulary to be able to produce the evidence for those particular terms. Now, if we were doing flashcards in this case in a physical card, index card format, here's what you would normally produce here. And so what you would produce is on one side, you're going to take the vocabulary terms that are assigned to you and put them on one side as big as you need to. And in the top left corner, you'll realize you're going to go ahead and place in the unit title and then also the objective number, so that when you have the word in hand here, you know that this is the time period or the theme that is associated with, and then also the objective that you're eventually going to meet. Okay? And then from there, what you'll do is to define it. So go ahead and flip to the back. Go ahead and make your definition of the term. Now, you can look it up. You can Google stuff. That's fine. But I think the best way to do definitions is to be able to write them in your own words and also to define it as you encounter it, either in the lecture or in the reading. So once you get that term in bold or in italics or whatever it might be, it's like, aha, this is the time to define it, because you are in the correct historical context of when that term exists. It may show up in other spots, but you have at least a clear definition of its particular context. Then what you're going to do is to look at the learning objective, okay, and then explain how this term meets this particular objective. So now there's an application of how that term could become evidence for a particular argument. So let's go and attempt this with a word that I think everybody knows called scribe, right? Scribe, just simply somebody who writes, right? Or let's have a more formalized definition: an administrator charged with reading, writing particular stories and financial transactions and so forth. Okay, that's a scribe. But what if there's the learning objective that looks something like this? Explain the origins of social stratifications. In other words, okay, how do we get a human society whereby we're divided up into different groups? Okay? And what are the consequences of that? Okay? And so in this case here, if you have an administrator who's charged with writing, how is it that this particular skill leads to social stratification? Okay? Now, I've provided some sentence frames as well, okay? And particularly this particular learning objective is dealing with causation, right? The consequences of division within a society. So there's some sentence frames that may help you to write out these learning objectives. So what would you write down? How would it meet the notion of the explanation of a society that's divided? Well, an administrator charged with reading, writing, particular financial financial transactions and stories, will give a select group a unique ability, okay, that's different than everyone else. And not only that, but is an ability that is helpful, that other elites, whether they're religious elites, political elites, or merchants, that they're going to need their particular services. And that's going to start to differentiate them in society. Okay. Let's use another example. Okay. So a scribe is, as we noted before, someone who's there to read and write. Okay. How then, according to this objective, may scribes affect various belief systems and practices in Eurasia over time here? Okay. So, and there's a possible sentence frame that you can utilize, and that in this case, because it's a change over time prompt, start talking about what might actually have changed. So let's go ahead and take this example. There are religious texts like the Hebrew Bible, for instance, that And where the changes is the focus on this word rather. So instead, rather than oral traditions, because in the past, the initial condition is that most human religious beliefs were passed on from generation through stories, through tales. But instead now, with the existence of scribes, you now have organized religions that have clearly defined customs and traditions, right? This is how you do things. Here are the rituals. Here's the order of sacrifice. And that's all written within the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Old Testament. Okay. And so in terms of how religious beliefs have been set by scribes, well, here it is right there. So it's not just a definition, someone who writes, but this is addressing change over time in terms of belief systems. Okay. So what you will do, if you are tasked with the digital version of this using Google Slides, there's a series of learning objectives that your teacher has given to you at this point. And what you're going to do is you're going to apply it to that particular term, albeit in a different format. So the digital format will look something like this. Same thing. Here's scribe. Here is the definition. Someone who's tasked with reading and writing. Go back to your learning objectives. Now that you know the definition, go through and say, all right, which one should I address? Which learning objective? So say, for example, if you decide, once you made that particular decision, go ahead and copy and paste that over from learning objective, both the number and also what it is, so that you can actually view it on screen, which is something you get to do with a digital format that you don't with the physical flashcards. Okay, and then you can go ahead and write in the response where religious texts like the Hebrew Bible, rather than oral tradition, define customs and traditions. So in that you have not just a definition, but how it applies to a historical question and in a particular historical context as well. Lastly, if you would like to practice this in the digital version, I know if you have the physical flashcards, you just kind of flip, and you can go ahead and test yourself in terms of definitions and so forth. There is an add-on in Google Slides called the Slides Randomizer. Okay, you can go ahead and install that, and then once you present using this particular tool, just go and hit start, and then it'll present, but it'll do it in a random order, so you're not memorizing, hey, this is the third slide, I know what this term is, and so forth and so on. So other than that, give this a shot. This is a really useful tool to practice the generating of evidence for these particular essays that we're going to encounter. Okay. All right, guys. Good luck.